The USA and Russia agreed on a ceasefire in the Black Sea, but did not impose sanctions for breaking the silence. The USA wants to take control of Ukrainian nuclear power plants. Political parties of Budanov, Malyuk and Zaluzhny. A new nuclear arms race in the world. And how Republicans united with Democrats to transfer frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. Watch all this in the new episode of Hell Point. The USA and Russia agreed on a ceasefire in the Black Sea but did not specify what the sanctions are for breaking the silence. How the negotiations went in the capital of Saudi Arabia, how the ceasefire at sea will be ensured, and how shuttle diplomacy works. Watch about this and more in this episode.
Another round of negotiations has concluded in Paraliski, Riyadh. The meetings took place without any sensational events and were rather technical in nature. Their background is a 30-day silence on the front proposed by Washington. This time, all three delegations found themselves in the same place at the same time, but they did not sit at a common table.
Indirect discussions will take place. One group will be in one room and the other in another. And they will be engaged in negotiations. It's like shuttle diplomacy in one hotel. Yes, that's how it will work. We will find out what everyone's positions are.
A truce and a similar negotiation process which has already been announced by the special representative. Trump's envoy to Ukraine, Kellogg, quite a lot. Back in the Cold War era, such Kissinger-style diplomacy, also called shuttle diplomacy, was quite often used in those conflicts where, again, the American country, and previously there was a significant gap between the sides, and so this day, having them in one room has not led to anything constructive, any negotiation initiative.
Now, in separate meetings, they talked about the details of a ceasefire, specifically a truce in the Black Sea to resume maritime trade. They also touched upon a pause in attacks on energy facilities and civilian infrastructure. After a 5-hour intense discussion with a 30-minute break, the first contact in Riyadh occurred between the USA and Ukraine on March 23rd. From Ukraine, the delegation included Deputy Foreign Minister Oleksandr Karasevich, Chief of the General Staff Anatoly Bargilevich, and Deputy Head of the President's Office Ihor Zhovkva. The delegation was led by Defense Minister Rostem Mertsu. Here is what he wrote about the meeting.
The conversation was constructive and substantive. We discussed key issues, particularly in the energy sector. The task of President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky, achieving a dignified and lasting peace for our country and people, and thus for all of Europe. We are working to make this a reality.
These are technical negotiations. Negotiations usually do not take just one day. Sometimes they last months, and some negotiations, like the Middle East settlement, last for years. Therefore, I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves here. We just need to understand that meetings will be quite regular, and not every meeting ends with public statements, joint press appearances, and so on. From what is known, this meeting concerned two topics. These are infrastructure and the safety of navigation. And it was about mutual ceasefire. We do not attack their maritime facilities, and including river facilities, they attack our facilities, our ports in Kherson, Mykolaiv, and the ports of Greater Odessa so that they can function. It's important to understand that it's not only about the Odessa ports, we have more of them. But unfortunately, the situation is such that they are under fire. And it is also about exchanging Ukrainian children, Ukrainian prisoners of war, children, to give them back, not exchange, but exchange the prisoners and the civilians who are also there in the territory of the occupying state or non-controlled territories, to return them to Ukraine.
Behind closed doors and without journalists in the building. Yes, the next day, March 24th, negotiations started between the Americans and the Russians. Moscow sent to Saudi Arabia not the most influential negotiators. Senator from the Sakhalin region Grigory Karasin and advisor to the FSB director Sergei Beseda. The US team was led by the senior director of the National Security Council at the White House, Andrew Peake, and senior State Department official Michael Anton.
And senior State Department official Michael Anton, who is known for his expertise in international relations and diplomacy, and has been involved in numerous high-level negotiations, precisely of the same Russian Federation, and most importantly, the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world, precisely of the same Russian Federation, with a focus on strategic stability and arms control. But that's not all. I remind you that the Russian Federation is a member of the Security Council, the main executive body of the United Nations, whose decisions are mandatory for implementation, and at the same time the largest nuclear country in the world. That's why the negotiation process is so difficult. This complexity is compounded by the fact that, in addition to all this, there are numerous and intricate global security issues, geopolitical and diplomatic challenges associated with the Russians and their allies, which further complicates the situation, which gain cheap and easy access to both energy and simply raw resources of the Russian Federation. Therefore, this tangle, I think Trump himself has already realized that this tangle is actually not so easy to unravel.
But hope, as they say, dies last. The White House is striving for a truce by Easter, and Russia in turn is dragging out the process, traditionally violating all agreements. The latest phone call was no exception. The conversation between Trump and Putin, having agreed not to strike energy facilities, the Russians are launching hundreds of drones every day.
Now, after the last meeting in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, it is absolutely clear to the whole world that Russia is the only one prolonging this war. The only one who brought it here and who needs to continue it. Since March 11th, there has been a proposal for an unconditional ceasefire, and such strikes have already stopped. But it is Russia that continues all this. And still, every night and every day, it delivers the most cynical strikes.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The chess game continues. Whether Trump can achieve peace by stopping the fire and Russia, time will tell.
The USA wants to take control of Ukrainian nuclear power plants. This initiative was voiced by the President of the USA himself. What are the real prospects of such a scenario, why America needs it, and Zelensky's reaction to such a proposal? Watch right now.
Yes, otherwise. Having not immediately agreed with official Kyiv on U.S. access to our critically important minerals, Donald Trump switched to a new asset of Ukraine.
Everything we know about Donald Trump tells us that if a task does not yield to his cavalier approach, he abandons it and switches to where he can achieve quick and striking victories.
Yes, according to both Western and domestic media, the Trump administration is seeking new terms. For the states to access Ukraine's critically important energy assets, expanding their economic demands on Kyiv as part of advancing a peace agreement with Russia. Washington allegedly wants Zelensky to transfer control to the U.S., if not the rare earth metal extraction sector, then at least the nuclear power plants. Under the White House's management, they would allegedly be much safer.
He said that the U.S. could provide significant assistance in operating these plants, thanks to their experience in the field of electric power and utilities. American equipment for these plants would be a better protection and support for Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
He confirmed that the U.S. has far-reaching plans for Ukraine's nuclear energy, and President Zelensky himself. However, if the White House statement refers to nuclear power plants in the plural, then, according to our president, during the conversation with Trump, it was only about one Zaporizhzhia, or nuclear power plant.
There was a question regarding the nuclear power plant. The question was not about a network of nuclear power plants. The question was exclusively about the plant that is currently under temporary occupation.
According to Zelensky, Trump proposed to restore it through joint efforts.
I asked the president, and if there is an understanding that America can restore it, I told him, yes, if it can be modernized, invested in, etc. We are ready to discuss this with you, but we talked exclusively about one plant that is under temporary occupation by Russia.
So, such a response inspired Trump, who loves to win quickly everywhere and always, so much that he joyfully began sketching plans for the White House administration. Plans for control over almost the entire Ukrainian nuclear energy sector. As a result, Zelensky had to separately explain to the American president that investing in our nuclear sector, the United States, can do so without any problems, but owning and managing it, no.
All nuclear power plants belong to the people of Ukraine. These are state-owned nuclear power plants. We do not have private ownership. Energy, nuclear sector in Ukraine, yes. We have thermal generation, we have green energy, there is a private partner. This is completely private energy. This is absolutely clear and correct. But all nuclear power belongs to the state of Ukraine and the temporarily occupied Zaporizhzhia region. In the city of Enerhodar, where this occupied station is located, it also belongs to the Ukrainian state. And everyone recognizes this. By the way, the IEA recognizes it, various international institutions recognize it.
To transfer control of even one nuclear power plant in Ukraine to Trump, it would be necessary to rewrite almost half of the legislation, analysts believe. Only after this can official Kyiv privatize the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant.
And then, from the supposedly privatized assets on the American side, sell electricity in Ukraine. Otherwise, I don't see what economic sense it makes for them. It's quite a complex maneuver. But it's unrealistic. No one will agree to this.
But if by some unimaginable scenario this happens, only privatization. The privatization of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant will take years. Trump would need even more time for the modernization of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant after arriving there, of the Russian world.
And the question is, are we capable of restoring this station? We have discussed this. In my opinion, I said that just the station is not enough because there must be the appropriate infrastructure, water supply, and also technical personnel. And there are many steps needed for the station to start in 1.5 to 2.5 years. To bring money, to provide what it should, electricity, primarily for the people.
Whether Trump, who likes to get everything here and now, will agree to this after understanding the situation, the question remains open. However, judging by the behavior of the controversial billionaire, analysts tend to believe that the American president will soon announce his new desires, leaving behind ideas about managing and supposedly protecting Ukrainian nuclear energy from the Russian Federation.
Political parties of Zaluzhny, Budanov, and even the head of the SBU, Malyuk, in Ukraine more and more often. The topic of elections comes up, so the head of the Committee of Voters of Ukraine predicts an overwhelming number of political forces in the upcoming elections. Watch more details right now.
In Ukraine, people have started talking more frequently about elections. And, as the head of the Committee of Voters of Ukraine, Oleksandr Koshel mentioned in the upcoming expression of will, it will be, so interesting. The battle is expected to be fierce. Because a multitude of new parties will emerge. Budanov, Zaluzhny, and even Malyuk.
For us, it is extremely important to create conditions for new political forces that will emerge from the military environment. That is, I am not revealing a secret right now, obviously. In the elections, we will see Valery Zaluzhny's party, which could claim at least 1/3 of the seats in parliament. Kirilo Budanov's party, theoretically, yes. The party of Malyuk, the head of the SBU, possibly yes. Several parties that will echo the names of well-known authoritative military units. We have already counted this, 5-7 political forces, plus the volunteer parties. Conditions need to be created for them because the military will not be able to actively participate in the election campaign if demobilization does not occur. And I think that this idea needs to be conveyed to our Western partners who are quite boldly now throwing around theses, I mean Vitkov, about being ready, that the electoral process is almost starting. We have our own interests, we have the logic of the political system, we have the logic of development. Political systems, political parties, mass media, this is our internal affair that we need to manage.
States that maintained pacifism and did not even speak about nuclear programs are massively changing their views. The change in the geopolitical balance and Trump's radical revision, US policies towards Europe have triggered a new nuclear arms race in the world. Watch this report for more details.
The new nuclear arms race.
They, for a time, did not believe and did not see the degree of Russia's determination, its president, or the supreme commander-in-chief.
Russia continues to flaunt its nuclear capabilities.
To deter in this way through the possibility of a nuclear response. For us, it is more cost-effective.
The rapprochement between Washington and Moscow has prompted Europe to consider the possibility of developing its own nuclear forces. In early March, the US president made an appeal to abandon nuclear weapons, assuring that significant progress has been made on this issue with Russia.
We have made significant progress with Ukraine and Russia in recent days. It would be wonderful if everyone got rid of their nuclear weapons.
There, as a change in policy, the US may not defend another NATO member that has been attacked if the country does not meet the defense spending threshold.
Nobody knows about NATO more than I do. I said back then, if you don't pay, we won't defend you. And I said it. The money started flowing. But Obama could have said it, and Bush. But nobody said it except me. Frankly, I saved NATO.
In the 1960s, the US took Western European countries under its nuclear umbrella. This was done to dissuade them from seeking to have their own nuclear weapons, as well as to maintain the global balance of power. Now, such a sharp disregard for the alliance has made Germany, Poland, South Korea, and Japan consider creating their own nuclear shield. After World War II, Germany committed to not having its own nuclear weapons. However, a certain number of munitions are stationed on German territory under the US nuclear umbrella. Their use is only possible by order of the US president.
Putin has no desire to capture all of Europe. This is a completely different situation than during World War II. During World War II, there was no NATO. Now there are countries there that are armed.
The future Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, stated that he would reach out to France and the United Kingdom to discuss the issue of nuclear weapons proliferation.
The expansion of nuclear weapons deployment is an issue we need to discuss. We must be stronger together in nuclear deterrence. Changes in global security now require us Europeans to discuss this issue together.
There was no delay in Merz's response.
Good day, esteemed President Putin.
I know President Putin well, and if he reacts this way, it means he understands that what I said is true. And I also know that he doesn't keep his word, the given word. He has already done this, and I am here to confirm it, as we, together with Chancellor Merkel, acted as guarantors of the Minsk agreements within the Normandy process, which he deliberately violated.
French President Emmanuel Macron himself announced that he is ready and willing to discuss this issue.
Responding to the historic call of the future Chancellor of Germany, I decided to open strategic debates on the protection of our allies on the European continent through our nuclear deterrence.
Lithuania, a neighboring country to Russia, also wants to acquire nuclear weapons. But Article 137 of the Lithuanian constitution prohibits the deployment of weapons of mass destruction and foreign military forces in the country.
We believe it is necessary to assess the possibilities of amending Article 137 of the Constitution of the Republic of Lithuania if our allies propose certain real plans for the deployment of nuclear weapons or their components in Lithuania, as well as to review other commitments.
For the potential deterrence of the aggressor country Russia, the interest in deploying nuclear weapons was also expressed by the President of Poland, Andrzej Duda.
He is a fantastic person. 84% of Poles voted for me. You must be doing something right if you're communicating with Trump.
Duda expressed confidence that Donald Trump could make the decision to relocate nuclear warheads from Western Europe or the USA to Poland.
NATO's borders moved eastward in 1999. Therefore, after 26 years, there should also be a relocation of NATO's infrastructure to the east. To me, this is obvious. Russia didn't even hesitate when relocating its nuclear weapons to Belarus. They didn't ask anyone for permission.
This nuclear umbrella is to avoid getting wet under this nuclear rain.
The Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons from 1968 recognizes 5 nuclear states: the USA, China, Russia, the United Kingdom, and France. Besides them, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel, which does not officially acknowledge it, also have nuclear weapons. India, Israel, and Pakistan never signed the treaty but developed nuclear weapons, as did North Korea. By 2025, the world is close to having more nuclear states, approximately 1525, due to Trump's policies and the withdrawal of American guarantees.
The incredible has happened. Republicans and Democrats have united and are urging the US president's administration to push allies to use frozen Russian assets. Why could Trump influence this, and what are the prospects of such a decision? Find out right now.
Meanwhile, in Saudi Arabia, American representatives are conducting hours-long negotiations with both the Ukrainian and Russian sides. In Washington, there are their own negotiations. Democrats and Republicans have united to find leverage against Russia. And they found it. Frozen Russian assets. American politicians have, in the ongoing debate, brought up once more the discussion about using all frozen funds and potential implications. Tonight, to aid Ukraine by, rather than limiting to the interest.
Expand the U.S. position during the negotiation process. As a long-term period, we are not only fixated on them.
The corresponding proposal was sent by senators to Secretary of State Macron Rubio. Politicians are asking whether the Trump administration believes in using frozen Russian assets to pressure Russia in negotiations, and whether the administration is ready to transfer funds to Ukraine for the purchase of American weapons.
This is a direct opportunity for Trump to send a signal to the Russian Federation. And indeed, between the "or" signal and the action. On this path, of course, there are significant gaps. But everything depends on the compliance of the Russian aggressor. It's not just about statements on normalizing relations or flattering words towards Trump himself. Everything depends on the negotiation process. Will the Russians agree to a real de-escalation? Not just in words, but in reality.
Currently, Putin continues to play his game of delay. And it's a matter of time before the American president gets tired of it. That's when the confiscation of Russian assets to aid Ukraine will be discussed again. And it will be discussed with emphasis.
In reality, everything depends on this issue. No longer on Trump, but on the Russians. If the Russians and directly Putin continue to lead us on, I believe that by around mid-May, this topic might take in a different direction and radically change Trump's policy and that of the entire US towards the topic of the Russian-Ukrainian war.
There is another important nuance in this whole story. Western financial institutions hold between 300 to 350 billion in Russian assets. At the same time, the Americans have about 7 billion of this entire amount at their disposal. It turns out that the leverage is extremely unreliable, as on March 20th they decided not to confiscate after all.
They can give a signal that these funds, and we know about Russian assets, that in that context, they're less than $10 billion according to various estimates. And in the USA, it's either just $6 or just $8 billion. So indeed, not such a large amount, of course, if compared to the European part. But nevertheless, it would be a serious signal for European partners regarding further actions. And we see how in Europe, the topic of confiscation of Russian assets has come to a halt because several countries oppose it, as it destabilizes the financial situation within the EU itself.
Thus, the decision of the USA could also force European countries that are hesitating to reconsider their position. Again, this is not about the current moment. As long as Trump believes Putin wants peace, the American president might not want to pressure Russia. But how long will Trump hold out when he realizes he's being led by the nose? And then, the proposal to confiscate Russian assets, which has found bipartisan support, might become extremely appealing to Trump.
That's all for today. Like, subscribe to the channel, and watch other news in the new episode of Hellpoint.